one another. All right, so now with those announcements out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Amelia.
Good morning. My name is Amelia, and I'm the Children's Program Director here at the River. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. Before I begin, I would like to share with you a small experiment that the children at River Kids will be doing today. The children will be given some paper clips and a container of water to see if the paper clips will float or sink in the water. Anyone here thinks that the paper clips will float? Who here thinks that the paper clips will sink? Okay, it makes sense, right? Because the density of the metal paper clips is higher than the density of the water. But there are exceptions to this. So after the service, I would encourage you to chat with some of our elementary kids about what they discovered today. Now, as many of you know, that we are currently in a sermon series called Can Faith Help Us Navigate Difference? As you can observe yourself, there are many differences in the world. There are cultural and racial differences, language barriers, differences in customs and social norms, religious differences. In the US alone, there are more than 200 Christian denominations and a staggering of 45,000 worldwide. And this is just Christianity. Political ideologies, economic disparity, debates on what makes a fair wage, perspective on gender roles, LGBTQ rights and inclusion, and many, many other. All of which, if not navigated well, can give rise to storms of conflicts, divisiveness, polarization, and broken relationships. John Weltwood, a prominent psychologist, psychotherapist, and a spiritual teacher, argues that many external conflicts, whether in personal relationships, communities, or societies, are a reflection of unresolved internal struggle. And so he argues that to address the storms in our world, we have to first turn inward and address our internal storms. The differences, the fragmentations, and the contradiction in ourselves. And I'm sure this is not the first time you have heard of this concept. Many key thinkers such as Carl Jung, Rollo May, and theologians such as Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, Richard Rohr, all emphasize the importance of inner healing as foundational to resolving relational issues. You may have heard sayings like, if you do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? So today, I would like to explore together how to process our internal storms so that we can be a calm presence in the storms outside. How to navigate our internal conflicts and contradictions so that we can relate to others in a way that are peaceful and authentic despite our differences. A few weeks ago, as I was reviewing stories for the River Kids, I noticed something that is often overlooked when we think about Jesus' ministry. And that is, Jesus took a lot of solitary time. Luke 5, verse 16 and other passages tell us that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and pray. I don't know about you, or if you have really tried this before, but being alone is not easy. In fact, many people struggle with solitude because sitting in silence can reveal to us our unprocessed emotions, our internal conflicts, and this can feel very uncomfortable. Many turn to distractions such as scrolling on social media, binge watching, overworking, even constant socializing. Now, these are not bad, I do them too. But when they become a coping mechanism to avoid feeling our emotions, confronting our insecurities, or tending to our wounded parts, they can lead to even more anxiety, even more burnout, and unhealthy emotional reliance on others. When we look into when and why Jesus took solitary time, we can see that Jesus was very much like us, human with internal struggles. For example, before his public ministry began, Jesus entered into 40 days of fasting and solitary time, during which Jesus faced temptation and identity challenges. Matthew 4 tells us that during this time, the tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." This passage suggests that Jesus experienced a tension between the flesh and the spirit, between human desires or hunger and divine purpose. Maybe Jesus also struggled with the temptation to prove his divinity, a struggle that in some ways may mirror our own struggles with seeking external validation, instead of being grounded in our true worth. What about the struggles with human relationships? Jesus encountered them too. In Mark 3, Jesus' growing ministry attracted large crowds, increasing both his influence and opposition. Jesus' radical actions, such as healing on Sabbath and casting out demons, led to accusations and misunderstanding from both religious leaders and his own family. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said he is out of his mind. His family probably feared that Jesus was stirring up unnecessary trouble with powerful authorities and felt the need to intervene. Now, I'm a mother of a young man, so I wonder how I would react if one day my carpenter's son, Jesus was a carpenter, all of a sudden left his normal, ordinary life and gathered 12 disciples, traveled by foot across plains and wilderness, and began preaching about a new kingdom. That's not something that is easy to accept, especially coming from an Asian background. Parents have expectations, right? Doctor, lawyer, even carpenter, this all makes sense. But what Jesus did must have seemed so reckless to his family. Some may even call it delusional. Conflicts in close relationships, especially within families, can be deeply distressing. Research shows that about 27% of Americans aged 18 and older have cut off contacts with a family member. 27% is a significant number. And it makes me wonder how much of our conflicts in the world stem from conflicts at home. Family conflicts, especially in childhood, can lead to insecure attachment, making it harder to trust others. Betrayal or neglect can cause difficulties in believing in others' reliability and good intentions. Difficulty with empathy, difficulty with setting down boundaries. All of this can come from a high conflict upbringing. Recognizing how family conflicts shape our interactions with the world and seeking healing can improve our well-being and also how we treat others. Another example of Jesus' internal struggles took place after the feeding of the 5,000. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. Theologians often interpret Jesus' action as a rejection of earthly power structure in favor of a spiritual mission centered on inclusivity and social justice. His internal struggle here may have involved balancing public expectation of what a Messiah would look like with his commitment to the transformative, nonviolent, and upside-down vision of God's kingdom. When it comes to facing injustice and conflicts in the world, we are often confronted with a difference of opinions on how to address them. Maddie Abbott talked last week about how there's not one correct biblical way to address a conflict. In fact, there are biblical interpretations to justify the different approaches. For some people, this may sound disconcerting, even threatening, especially for those who view the Bible as the ultimate rule book, providing certainty on what is right and wrong, governing their actions and the actions of others. This black and white perspective helps determine their stance on policies, groups, and beliefs. However, this approach can be dangerous and does not reflect the example Jesus set. Richard Rohr, a contemporary theologian, critiques our Western tendency toward dualistic thinking, which categorizes experiences into binary opposites, such as good versus bad, sacred versus the secular. He emphasizes that this mindset can limit one's understanding of spirituality and the divine. Richard said, "How we in organized Christianity got in trouble is we largely, overwhelmingly, read the words of Jesus, who was talking non-dually with dualistic mind." Being non-dualistic is not the same as being neutral or passive. Not at all. Jesus flipped table and drove out money changers from the temple, accusing them for turning God's house into a den of thieves. This is a passionate response towards corruption and injustice within the religious establishment. Jesus rebuked religious leaders for their hypocrisy, calling them whitewashed tombs and blind guides. Jesus also warned against the love of money and telling the rich young ruler to sell his possession and follow him, emphasizing that the allegiance to God requires radical commitment, not neutrality. After Jesus took his solitary time in the mountain, something quite amazing happened. And this is from the book of Matthew. After he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat carrying his disciples was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on lake. When disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." After Jesus came out of his solitary time, he met up with his disciples who were already far out from the land by walking on water. Jesus was so calm and steady that the water held him up. Talking about being steady, remember the paper clips experiment I talked about earlier? Well, apparently, if you have a steady hand and you are able so gently and so calmly place the paper clips on the surface of the water, maybe using a little tool, the water will hold up the paper clips. Due to surface tension, there are cohesive forces between the water molecules creating a skin-like effect, allowing the paper clips to hold tension and balance on the water surface. I think this is pretty amazing. Now, there are different ways to interpret this story, but I particularly appreciate the metaphorical connection. When we can face our internal storms, when we take time to release the knots within ourselves and bring awareness and compassion to places that are wounded or divided inside, we can better integrate the different perspectives and forces. We can balance the absolute and relative truths of this world. We can engage the storms in our world. Jesus' internal calmness calmed his surroundings. So, how do we calm the storms in our hearts? How did Jesus pray and reconcile his internal conflicts and differences? Let's hear our next story. This is a story about Jesus in Gethsemane, the night before his crucifixion. Jesus said to his disciple, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it's not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." This passage reveals to us one of Jesus' most intimate moments of anguish. Jesus spilled his heart out, expressing his fear of what to come and his hesitation. He was so overwhelmed and stressed that his emotion, as you can see, projected outwardly in the way he reacted and criticized his disciples. But you could also see the transformation in this passage. You could notice the ego slowly dying, letting go of control and a sense of security. Not in a sense of defeat, but an acceptance of a larger unfolding mystery. We can notice the shift from falling with the face to the ground, wrestling with emotions, to Jesus slowly trusting beyond fears. His language, he went from saying, "If it is possible, please take it away," to saying, "If it's not possible, may it be done." Then he stepped forward with a newfound strength. "Rise, let's go," Jesus said. Let's continue. While Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now, but the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the man stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scripture be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Jesus was sold out by someone very close to him, someone he considered a friend. This is definition of betrayal. Personally, I can't help but feel outraged and disgusted by such an act. And yet, in the midst of it all, Jesus remained remarkably calm and composed. Some might even say that Jesus actively tried to de-escalate the situation by referring Judas as a friend. And according to the book of Luke, healing the ear of the servant. When his friend struck out with a sword, Jesus rebuked him, speaking with authority, showing an incredible display of control despite the circumstances. Jesus extended his inner peace to those around him, allowing both his companions and captors just a little bit moment to settle. Maybe even invited them to reflect on their actions, asking essentially, are the weapons really necessary here? I'm not a criminal. You can arrest me, for I am surrendering willingly, and this must be done. Because Jesus made peace with his circumstances and the paradoxes within himself, fully experiencing his humanity, the sorrow, the exhaustion, the hunger, even the doubt, and fully aligning himself with his divinity, the divine calling and the oneness with the Father. Jesus was able to hold the tension between seemingly opposing truths. Jesus navigated the differences and paradoxes of this world through his presence, his state of being. Compassionate, dignified, and truthful. You may recall, Peter walked on water too. God showed us that we too can be like Jesus. God's Spirit is in us too. And when we embrace this, we can confidently take steps into unpredictable water. And God wants us to participate actively, courageously facing differences and contradictions in this world. And the best way to prepare us is to get connected with the God within us, with the love that binds all of us despite our differences. This is how we will be inspired to expand and empowered to confront whatever stands in the way of that expansion. Solitude is not about isolation. It's about intentionally processing for clarity, wisdom, strength, renewal, and connection. So that we can re-emerge courageously into the world with a presence that is peaceful and authentic. And here are just a few suggestions on how we can make the best out of our solitary time with God. 1, be compassionate with yourself. Accept that emotions are complex. At River Kids, we began our lesson by first checking in with the children. We asked the children how they're doing with showing their 2 thumbs. So you can be really good. You can feel really bad. And then there's a variety in between. You can be happy and sad at the same time. You can feel confused, yet courageous. And this is okay. It is through accepting our whole being with compassion that we can move through the struggle and step forward. Number 2, solitude is not the same as overthinking. Although we often confuse them and shift between the two. Overthinking keeps us stuck in a loop of analysis, cycling pattern of what ifs and doubts that don't really lead into conclusion. Our minds and spirits are busy and overwhelmed, and often we end up with even more anxiety. Overthinking comes from a desire to control the future or fix the past, or the need for certainty. Solitude, on the other hand, may involve what emotions am I feeling now? It may involve naming our emotions, accepting them without judgment, and releasing them either by journaling or talking it out to God. The purpose is not to find solution. Not every question has an answer, Think of Jesus' time in Gethsemane. It is about letting go of control and surrendering into the goodness of God so you can get more relief, clarity, and peace. Number 3, utilize mindfulness techniques. There are many techniques you can explore to help you refocus and not get caught up with overthinking. And here are some of my favorites. Practice deep breathing. This is a very effective tool to slow down, and you can do this any time of the day. Light a scented candle. Focusing on a nice smell can calm your mind and help you focus on the present moment. Take a walk and feel the rhythm of your movement. Paying attention to our bodies can give our mind some rest. Solitude is a gift. Resting place for all our weariness and burdens. A safe place to experience and receive from God. Let me close us in prayer while I invite the worship team to come back to the stage. God, thank you for the reminders that you are with us always. You are the calm presence in the storm inside and the storm outside, telling us to take courage and catching us when we fall. May your presence be our guide in differences and contradictions. Amen.